I wanted to say something a little bit. It's kind of getting into a little bit, but it's kind of like thinking about I had mentioned the thing about the medical power of attorney being used as fixture in real estate, um, based upon like the redundant frequency or what commercial venue of living quarters is, and as compared to what a neighborhood might not necessarily mean, and maybe an accusation of either knowing or knowing what a television might very well represent in that way, based upon a commercial itself of advertising. Probably more so than maybe even a television series, with more descriptive factors about like a commercial venue, and ultimately what was then idea of like prepaid postage of like food stamps getting beyond that, and into the card of electronic and being a Lone Star, and um, later into the SNAP supplemental nutrition assistance program, based upon supplemental security income uh, as a benefit that's provided normally and associated with unemployment, or the need. I mean, it's not limited to anything about being handicapped, although it's normally identifying. Sometimes I've read it before, just not having a source of income. Okay. Um, yeah, there's certain factors that seem to be whether or not if a supplemental security income is going to be maybe the real issue of like of like whether or not if the United States Treasury and Internal Revenue Service is going to really get very specific about EBT. In my mind, it's like the E equal MC squared of like what the English Parliament is to like the pastel green of province of like world history, and very much is the pastel green of identifying world history as like a province. Yet like in a law library jurisprudence, it's the pastel green book with the black back. Okay, and the thing about that, it seems to be like whether or not that the only thing about the real estate of non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, this is maybe a factor of like monopolizing only what opportunity means. Ultimately, whether or not the Social Security is going to be anything more than maybe not being degreed or non-degreed in a way, maybe not even participating with an IRA, or what that might only be as maybe a standard transaction at the bank as a checking account, and maybe a unknown factor whether even if that even represents maybe an intellectual claim of management in a way of like even product registration of whether a product registration is going to reflect any idea of like an automatic perception that would not require anything other than whether itemizing it, or any preference of like a some thought of like retiring would like even include the thought of an IRA in that way, or ultimately getting to if it's going to be maybe an identifying factor, maybe neglect based upon lack of experience, or or the real deal about the entire situation, and ultimately even the ERISA statute of the thing about it. But the thing with this is like like the my thing about the E equal MC squared. I mean, it's ultimately in my mind like the automatic direct source in the form of the EBT of like normally identifying a transaction at a grocery store. And my perception of not limited to, but it's kind of like a like the deal about life, and maybe not necessarily the excuse on any participation, or what English sounds like as an English Parliament or a golf course or a pastel green, and like world history is like an executive administration of like some current idea of like what platform, or excuse me, architecture and platform is in programming and language, or what only embedding encryption might, be, only, suggesting, a little bit more than maybe a kernel, and I'm going to have to really think about that before I really, act like I really know what I'm talking about, involving maybe embedding encryption. And the thing, that I'm kind of like thinking about, involving the kernel, and ultimately, the night vision of like Abraham Lincoln and a Lincoln Continental with that like rectangle, hood ornament, and it's ultimately getting to, the deal about the rectangle, or the power squared symmetrical asymmetrical deal of like even global positioning systems, and the deal about the even my thought of what seems to be like the issue between like the Christopher Columbus, and my thing about the Dodge using the HT or the double forward slash, and automatically anyone it's like been on a laptop could probably almost immediately identify the double forward slash, automatically thinking of the HTTP colon double forward slash, and like Dodge is like a like one, if not the only. I haven't looked for any other, but it's like, how could I not notice? And that's really what all it's been is, how could I not notice it? And it's like Dodge, okay? And the thing about, Dodge being 35 and NASA and, I-35 or what Austin Powers is, or Austin being 84 and Embassy and all that other stuff. But in case, yeah, so like the EBT, I mean, in my mind, it's kind of like my thought of like a calibration, or, three simple uh, methods of simple addition equating to the alphanumeric value of like 58. Not that when I was like doing that, it automatically was like, Hot Cafe or the McDonald's Golden Arches, deal about the actual alphanumeric value of like the letters and words of Hot Cafe. And really, those are really the actual, alphanumeric values that will, be of the three most simplest uh, methods of simple addition and computation, which is 58. And really, the thing about the three seems to be like a real big deal about the um, something about that in my mind. Like the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or the Trinity, or even the 3-point star, like Mercedes, or the triangle and the pi squared, ultimately getting to two triangles being a 6-point star, or the alphanumeric's 138, or a telepathic angel in the way, or the code blue thing of like a either the deep star 6, which seems to be something about night vision in my mind in the depths of the ocean, in the way of like no matter probably how bright it is, the deeper you get, it's going to be like almost like a almost equating to like nano units measuring night vision in like nano luminous in density that way of like nano units. Okay, but anyway, yeah. So like I mean, in ocean, it probably comparable reference has to just like a real dark night using the nano units. But anyway, yeah. So ultimately getting to the 6-point star, like the Israeli flag, the Star of David, and all that stuff. But anyway, back to the EBT. It's kind of like the thing about the supplemental security income, the acronym SSI. I mean, it's kind of like at this point, it's kind of like like the superstar investment, or the International Space Station and the international superstar thing, right? Well, anyway, so like it's kind of thinking about that, E equal MC squared, and that involving the EBT, and it being ultimately some computation getting to beyond the 58 thing of that symbolic representation, like a telepathic birth, or a telepathic mediation, in between the C and the PTIS on the backside of the US $1 bill. What that is to like the spirit of adoption, or the 94 thing of like annotated, or adoption, or abortion, or all the stuff like I've talked to previously on my youtube.com channel at Wade ASV Pretty PRIDDY, in coordination with Wade ASV Pretty PRIDDY 192. But anyway, yeah, so like it's like the E equal MC squared of like the EBT representing like the EE thing of like a Texas Instrument calculator that a program, like software engineering, or where there'd be a issue between solid state, or software, a programming of like printed circuit boards, and whatever the LED means in that way, between solid state or software, or some integrating factor of like even like what pastel is in my mind somehow like the thing of like middleware of like Oracle in the way of anyway, it's going off into different. But the E equal MC squared, it seems to be like the E being like the English Parliament in a way, like just the language itself, and the English pound. Okay, and it's kind of like the question is like, does the English pound look like the U.S. dollar, and ultimately or the euro dollar in a way of the thing about the just simple benefits in form of like a there was a period that the EBT card was actually given as a direct source, not really identified, but at this point, I mean, how could it really not be a direct source of like the English pound, or some thought of like the euro dollar reflecting like, hey, wake up. I mean, it's like a language thing, okay. Yet in Europe, I mean, come on, I mean, is it really at that point anything other than what a thought of what English maybe only sound as a euro dollar, and more so of like seven nations, um, having use of like language in the U.S. dollar of like currency and circuit, and quite a bit about language itself. But the thing with this is that like with the U.S. dollar, like whether if the degree level of a representation or considerable participant only gets to like whether distinguish the difference between corporate and business law, or degreed or non-degreed. Ultimately, getting the thought of like more so than not non-degree level, like ultimately having a deal about retiring, with whatever the deal is of any kind of preparation for retirement. Ultimately, being like the Social Security Administration, it introduces the supplemental security income, that seems to be like the SNAP food benefits and the Lone Star card, that seems to be ultimately, like a local, area network, or the internet protocol, kind of like, hey, you gotta, wake up about, what color code is sometimes about the pastel. And the thing about it is, at this point, how could the EBT like not be the English pound or the euro dollar in a way of E equal MC squared, or actually some of the computation on the back side of the US $1 that ultimately gets to that symbolic representation between the C and the PTIS is a minimal of like 58, and that one horizontal line in my experience is like ultimately getting about the Texas Instrument computer years later. At the time wasn't even my thought now what Texas Instruments is to like even a Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments and SOX compliance, or all that I've been talking about. But anyway, it's kind of like I'd mentioned like a commercial venue of living quarters. I mean, like a grocery store. It's just kind of like I was really kind of thinking about it here for about the last week or so. Really for the first time. I mean, seriously, seeing all that information about the EBT, and it was actually available as a card that doesn't even require going to a bank. And my thought at the time, it's kind of like, well, now it's kind of like, where's it at? But yet still at the same time, it's kind of like whether it's going to be really the issue of like, I know it all sounds like English. But yet is that the idea of like a checking account in the history of a mailbox in the form, even if a direct deposit of supplemental security from the United States Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, is going to be still the issue of like the history of a mailbox and a checking account, or Route 66, or what switching and routing is, and like networking and local area network that way, or even beyond that of like a degree level, like involving obviously wide area and world web, and international banking systems. And the thing with this is that really, I mean, if it's really getting to the the E equal MC squared, and all that about EBT being like the EE. I mean, it's almost like MC squared. It's like the pi squared in a way of representing the EE, which is like whether it's beyond or an error beyond the program of the printed circuit board, whether it's solid state in between, the idea of software of like a program of calculus going beyond, or whether it's a mistake or an error, the EE will pop up. I mean, that was my first thought, after like, seeing, certain factors of the International Electronic Engineering of that symbolic sign. You see it some on some backsides of laptops, where that unity of togetherness, being like a spirit of adoption, or a telepathic birth, or or what that is to adoption or abortion, or something about the airborne in a way of like a telepathic communication, being the thought of like my thought anyway, but like a telekinetic role of at least an academic level, that's normally not even provided, other than it's kind of like it's just like something that just happens, and it's kind of like just knowing, sometimes. But anyway, yeah. So like I took a special interest in it when I was kind of like thinking about Highway 59. I mean, since I like living parents, kind of like you got. I was kind of like going, wow, it's kind of like it's almost like seemingly like the accusation, like how could you not know? It's kind of like you've lived in Pearland, or like you just moved here, because it's kind of like what is really going on? Yeah, so like the deal about the EBT, it seemed to be like the E equal MC squared, as compared to maybe what an exponential quotient may or may not mean, in that way of E equal, or some Einstein theory, or some like genius, E equal MC squared, being beyond maybe only what pi squared is of like exponential variables of only addition and subtraction, as compared to an exponential quotient of like variables of powers of multiplication. I mean, it's kind of like the clarity of perfect intent vision, at the planetarium, some like huge magnification, some clarity and perfect intent vision maybe even the thought of like the infinite lines of like the 90-degree right angle. And it ultimately does get to the figure eight. Even the thought of conductivity, like of a panoramic academia, peripheral tolerance, combining the deal about the wand, the thing about the drumstick, or an anatomy with like a symmetrical asymmetrical deal, like from side to side, even in conductors in symphony, orchestrating the deal about waveform. Likewise, like a drummer normally would be like a B twin figure eight. But anyway, it's kind of like think about the E equal MC squared, applied to that EBT being the thought of the BT being the 2 and a 20, or being 22, or what the absentee thing is to Baby Ruth as compared to Truth being 87, or that thing about the nudicopters minus transfiguration equaling 12, the numerical and the word spelled out being the alphanumerical of like 87, or a miracle God, or the deal about the whether if absentee voting is only the issue of whether if a Baby Ruth is beyond one of the books in the King James Version Bible, and has the truth in Ruth, So like anyway, so like it's kind of like really getting to the thought of like what absentee voting is, even to like on par stuff like on a golf course, or a province in that way, like a pastel green, as compared to maybe the thought of maybe what a method of banking only might be as opportunity is maybe a non-degree, or other factors that might maybe give the appearance of at least that, um, or the thought of maybe what having to or legal tender in a way of like providing something about the freedom of speech and freedom of press is an amending factor. Not that it would be an accusation of litigation, or cause and effect, or the results of like like a public service announcement, like on television, right? It's kind of, wow, everyone knows. It's kind of like a huge secret, right? Yeah, so I thought I'd go ahead and just make sure that's like, wow, it's like everyone knows, right? Why not, right? Oh yeah, so like I yeah, so it's that thing, huh? Everyone knows, right? So anyway, so like in any case, so it seemed to be like the EBT, providing some information with supplemental security income that seems to be the forbearance of like student loans, or the humor uh, about anatomy, and in any case about Vantage Left 30, a ground rule double, yeah, or the deal about infinite lines and a 90-degree, and all that stuff about a baseball field, and likewise, and that's seemingly so about the ground rule double, or the deal about it. But anyway, yeah. So as far as like the Einstein E equal MC squared, it's kind of like with the pi r squared. I mean, it's almost like the symmetrical asymmetrical, automatic with like the rectangle, or the deal about the one and only latitude being the equator at a 90-degree. Ultimately getting to like even the sprite, and when normally the P is silent followed by an S normally. Yes, sprite is like the exact opposite, but when the P, the S and the P is switched, it's kind of like the P normally being silent sometimes, it's kind of like all of a sudden the P and the S is like automatically silent with like a right. It's got the right and sprite. I like the sprite in you. Now it's kind of like me talking about it like on YouTube. But anyway, it's like the deal about what is that, 18, what, 27, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51. It's like 52, like RITE. And the VPN, or what that is, like once again, like, the thing about the heartbeat of America, or, the heart plural being with an S, hearts in 71 Paraland, or, what it means to like the smart meter. I mean, for real, like with a NRG, because it seems to be like really the deal about pastel, that somewhere in between, like Univision, and like a Remo black dot drumhead, to like even the thing about an Aquarian, power white dot drumhead. And it seemed to be like really the deal that I mentioned a little bit earlier about like primate spawning beyond, the Prince of Wales and caviar, beyond the front lines of the beachfront. Uh, even the color code of the map, caviar being, like a bunch of little black dots, you know, uh, beyond the front lines of the beachfront, looking like Vernon State, Texas statues, like a bunch of black dots on the map. Or what primate spawning means that way. I mean, really, beyond the front lines of the beachfront, and all that stuff about the pastel, and it seemed to be like the big deal of like now. I mean, it wasn't even in any kind of way even significant, other than maybe just a photographic memory of just like passing by there on the way to the drum shop, like back in the '80s, and the Houston Post or some factors like that. So I was kind of like thinking about that, and with that EBT of like you know, I mean, really at this point, it's seems to be more and more about the direct sources, EBT being like an English Parliament or the English pound in a way of the AMC's E equal MC squared, and what that is to the EE of the backside of the US $1 in the form of like even the circle with the 90 degree to the northwest upper side of a circle that's normally identified with like a HTTP :// on some computers, and sometimes it's on the front side on the screen, whether it's a touch screen or a laptop, and sometimes in the settings that way with a 90 degree. In the Houston area, it's like an automatic, like a thought of like a Highway 290. My thought automatically, like almost like a Philadelphia, a Fox 29 News, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Um, Yeah, so like anyway, so it's simply like it goes on and on and on, and now it's like kind of like the Einstein genius thing about the E equal MC squared as compared to the English pound or the euro dollar in a way of what only province means to maybe only a non-degree issue of like jurisprudence, still a pastel green, and my thought of like a real estate really not being a commercial venue of like neighborhoods or what jurisprudence is in that way, like my thought of what the deal is of what's the real deal about monopolizing the thought of a result of jurisprudence, or monopolizing what the amending factors of the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, or I mean why the Fifth Amendment is like not a non-profit organization, or why U.S. patent is not copyright, or the real thought about patent pending, or the FDIC issue of like a daily standard transaction in the bank as non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, below business and corporate law. Uh, yeah, so I mean, it seems to be like really the deal. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the EBT being a source, just because it's English, and yet England, and not even suggesting anything other than maybe color code based upon like someone actually having a little bit of you know uh, academics about knowing that province had been identified in a pastel green. Automatically it's kind of like sojourning through the wilderness. You got to be me on the golf course, right? So in any case, so, all that pastel green, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the thought of what real estate is, um, monopolizing, or the thought of like jurisprudence, or what that black back really means, in a way of like whether or not if a degree level of the reputable standard is maybe only, whether or not if having fair use is only the idea of maybe of what manufacturing, maybe only what intellectual might only mean to like management in like an entire neighborhood, like on the entire North American continent in English, or don't be shy, or Vernon's in the way of like a black dot on the map, and what family law might not really even ever be discussed as whether it's even a reality or space exploration, unless it's like on television, or some factor like involving maybe the thought of the word relation between architecture and platform, between that or an equator, of a degree level of like reputable standards, maybe not considered maybe a uh, only what opportunity means, non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, or uh, 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 I mean, if it's only a degree or not degree, or if that only represents what only opportunity is, the embedding encryption, the big four, or some Abraham Lincoln involving like a kernel or a kennel. The Lincoln, being rearranged, and having a pronunciation of kennel, what that is to the telekinetic roll of the pen or paperweight. Normally, that's like the deal about national security, suggesting that there's like telepathic communication, and never really mentions alphanumerics or mental telepathy minus God equal Holy Spirit, or Jesus Christ, or what the deal is about the subliminal message, or being 177, or telepathic power. But normally, it's the telekinetic roll of the pen. I haven't seen it all in the same time, but the same duration. Um, I think I've seen it both on the same channel at different times. I think during like a 2 or 3 week period, maybe a 6 week period. Um, yeah, or what national security would only suggest is the thought of maybe only an academic, not necessarily the experience, like what going beyond like the executive classroom would mean, maybe to maybe even expenditures that way of the deal about the Stargate program, maybe what the deal is about it. Yeah. So like anyway, so like I was thinking about that with the supplemental security income and that EBT, because it seemed to be, whether or not if it's having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof, or maybe having a form of godliness and the idea of like a geographically attaching a local bank, like in like North American continent or Pearland, Texas, as a local area network of like whether making a grade beyond the internet protocol, local area network only represents maybe being on YouTube, or maybe some idea that family law maybe exists, like on television in the form of like a whether it's going to be reality even on television, to begin with anyway, uh, or if it just has to still be that, and whether proven if it's like even anything beyond maybe the thought of like characterization, not that it only is anything other than maybe practical application of principle, integration, and compatibility, not that it's yeah. So I mean, if that's ultimately getting to the only issue about like auditing legal media and deposition, well, hey, I have something to say about it. So anyway, so I was thinking about that because of the Einstein thing about the E equal MC squared. And I thought really it seemed to be like an idea of whether or not if a maritime law is only like liquid equity, suggesting maybe if piracy is the issue beyond the front lines of the beachfront in the form of like the redundant frequency, of maritime law going beyond the front lines of the beachfront in the form of maybe only what a residential neighborhood would only mean to redundant frequency, or the homeowners association, or even GMAC promissory notes, or the thought of like even electronics in a residential neighborhood as compared to maybe a corporate or a commercial venue like living quarters. If it's ultimately getting just to like what's programmed on television or like radio involving entertainment. If it's only going to be the issue of like like, well, who's dying? Who's like who's insubordination would only be a result of like jurisprudence or irreconcilable differences in the form of like maybe monopolizing maybe the separation between church and state in the form of like family law as compared to joint ventures and mergers of corporate law. You got to be kidding me. I mean, you know, uh, don't be fooled by imitations, but is that like a corporate venture and merger between, what people thought might be, maybe not aware of, maybe even of like what one might think is only a religious, participating factor of like marriage and church venues compared to a corporate venue like ventures and mergers of degree level as compared to what only like religion might only mean as maybe a weekend fly by night deal. You got to be kidding me. Proving to me that family law is even a reality, probably might not ever happen really. But truthfully, if it ultimately seems to be only distinguish the difference of like degree level, or for real, or what it is in ventures and mergers, representing the thought of like the mood being the MOT or the career, degreed career student on a major university, like practicing like case precedents and what litigation is as compared to what litigation is not, or what de facto is or is not to like litigation at a corporate level as compared to what even family law would even be the maybe the only word relation between like architecture and computer, ultimately getting to like the equator and operator, like once again, or the Better Business Bureau that way of like what only opportunity might mean as maybe non-degreed, or if at all maybe anything that would be maybe not that at all. So like convince me that like family law is in a reality. Anything other that's like not on television or like YouTube or some social media in a way, it's kind of like really not going to be easily convincing me really that considering considerable amount that's like already thing about me like even saying anything about it right now. But yeah, so anyway, yeah, so I thought I'd say that real quick. It's already gone like 28 minutes and 55 seconds. And really, is it going to be like the issue of like the EBT, or the having a form of godliness but denying the electronic power there of an EBT, or the English pound? Is that the accusation of like a degree level of maybe a breach or infringement, as what royalties might only be, as maybe the thought of like a defector seeking amnesty in the form of like the U.S. dollar and a direct deposit in a bank of not making gravy on a local area internet protocol of a local area network, or maritime law beyond the front lines of the beachfront in the form of like a RF redundant frequency, or some the Omega or ohms resistance in need of like Calamity Jane to like maybe identify the Pony Express and General Motors and GMC racing a bar. Yeah, sure. Yeah, the horn on the the horn on the saddle. Yeah, racing a ball, racing a bar on the saddle, huh? be on the raised white letter tires. Is the brake shoe you're looking for? Yeah, yeah, sure. So anyway, and it's kind of like it really gets, really. I mean, sometimes the humor is like ridiculously. I mean, it just like takes it off into a whole new direction of perception. I mean, that's so very much. I mean, anyway, yeah. So like any case, yeah. So anyway, I thought I'd say that because it seemed to be like whether or not if the U.S. dollar is on the thought of whether a retroactive presidential administration might only be a factor of like for Purple Mountain's majesty above the fruited plain, whether that's going to define the meaning of international import and exporting of plain horizons as compared to business law of like a pie chart, the circle like percentage as compared to the plain horizon. It's normally of triangles, not necessarily a pie chart at all. The pie chart is normally in business law. International import and exporting is more so that might maybe represent maybe more so an eccentric triangle based upon the percentage or the source of what's identified maybe as a nation's or country. Nations are sometimes more so identified with available information as a 9-degree distribution of publications representing what some thought of idea would be a country, not necessarily a nation, because of whether it's a degree level or not seems to be really the only issue about knowing or not knowing that fact. And the thing with it is that like an import and exporting, identifying like a country or a nation's like main sources, it's like normally involving, like what trigonometry might only present maybe as a slope, not necessarily a slope, but an angle of a plane horizon, as compared to a pie chart normally associated with business law, as compared to international import and exporting that normally requires, normally, I mean, at that point, I mean, I'm assuming that it would be more involved and at least a minimum of a bachelor degree. But anyway, yeah, so like I thought I had that to say because it seemed to be like whether or not if the degree level of like just the EBT and SNAP food benefits is going to be really the degree level, or in the 90-degree issue of like whether or not the pastel of like province is going to be an issue of like pastel grade of like jurisprudence monopolizing the thought of like opportunity in the form of like a just like being in a bank period at all. Or maybe if the U.S. dollar, maybe it's just kind of like maybe like not aware of like the excuses like hey, or even a direct deposit in like any local bank representing any idea of like geographic attachment or a degree level maybe of a breach or the thought of infringement of royalties, maybe just being like the accusation in God we trust, right? Or some like religious attachment to like only what that means to maybe the entire like world of like international banking system, like here in Pearland, Texas, being like 71 in Pearland and like an act of God, right? Sure, or some idea of like as American as hot dogs and apple pie, between the thought of a baseball and like a figure eight skater and all that stuff about perfect sense and vision. But anyway, it's already going on like 32 minutes and 59 seconds right now, 33 minutes like exactly. But anyway, I just want to say that real quick because it seemed to be like whether or not if infringement of royalties would be seems the difference as maybe um oh yeah, infringement and what's the deal about that a breach. I mean, if it's really going to be the difference between a power and principality between a breach or infringement maybe would only suggest maybe intellectual in a way of only international law having fair use or managing factors that would only maybe suggest only what management only means is a fixture in real estate, whether it's a medical power of attorney or or even a medical power of attorney or a fixture in real estate identifying a commercial venue of living quarters, like even a grocery store. I mean, living quarters. I mean, who you kidding? I mean, is like the degreed world stating that neighborhoods are not identifying, a commercial venue of living quarters as residential or neighborhoods, or what's the real deal about Washington D.C. and the yays and nays? I mean, for real, So that's really why I'm really thinking about. Hey, plus I'm like a drummer and like really love everything about it, really. But the thing with it is that um, it's sort of like doing something on a national level. I mean, that's my thought. Like automatically, I spent years and years doing it, and everything that I know now about what I've been talking about, it seems to be like anything. Going towards, like a commercial venue of living quarters that would even include, hey, there's like food and grocery stores, like a fixture in real estate is, so like swiping that EBT card, really normally identified as like SNAP food benefits, or, if it's going to be the contesting factor or a contesting factor or not. maybe identifying, maybe the English pound as compared to the euro dollar, or the E equal MC squared factor about, where the source really is coming from or available, made available, or if it's just an English language thing, uh, suggesting maybe England is really not North America. But have you driven a Ford lately, right? Like, or is it the absentee voting on par? Uh, are you kidding me? Or the deal about the absentee voting, or all that stuff about the factor of Baby Ruth, or the truth, or there's quite a bit about that absentee voting. It seems to be like I mean, a grade within itself, and whether experiences, excelled, if the thought is the phrase that you probably heard through generations, excelled above the rest, or what that is to Shirley Geo Prism, and how they excel. I mean, it seemed to be like really the big deal about importing and exporting of like the last century, previously of, during the 80s, still in Port of Houston. The thing is that, I mean, if like Houston's really representing, like entertainment law and everything about the WIA International and electronic power, or television being an electronic god, and 130 and a telepathic map, or a telepathic eagle in the way of even going beyond the 1200 airbags. But anyway, it's already like going on 36 minutes, and I thought I'd had that much to say because you know it seemed to be like really that supplemental security income is providing some information that's really that I'm not really ignoring. That's why I'm really talking about it right now, because it seems to be whether or not to have a degree level is only maritime law. Not making a grade beyond internet protocol in the form of like what redundant frequency and RF is to 24, or Apple iPhone SE being the SE being 24, or like pronunciation and language and spelling and alphanumeric value and all that stuff about the in between the recent statute and the IRA, or the HOA, or even the bird thing about the Israeli bird and Washington Post, and the initials WP on either side, and like the sprite thing flipping the S and a P, and both of them being silent and being right, like a heart thing, or the deal about the bird, of the Israeli bird, blue and purple. That way with like the pronunciation of the bird being whoopa, or like the oldest governmental computer mainframe being the whopper, or the R factor not being in the bird's name whoopa, or like the Washington Post and what that is, the legal media and deposition, and the thought of the mayor's office and proclamations and declarations, or, I mean, is that really going to exclude it in any kind of way? Really, constitutional law of ratifying and codifying is really, like I have something to say about that, likewise in addition. But the thing with this is that really, if it's ultimately getting to the DC of divisible clause and direct circuitry, or duration based upon compatibility, or the DC thing, or, duration of, what the circuit or idea of like a currency is in alphanumerics and parallel Texas, or attenuation of electronic power. Yeah, I have something saying. That's what I'm saying right now. And the thing with this is that I mean, if it's going to be a degree level of like practical application of power and principality, or dimensional clause, or electronic power, as compared to what commercial paper might only suggest as a checking account, or like money itself, or maybe a daily standard transaction in the New York Stock Exchange. Likewise, the commercial paper is like a automatic deal on the New York Stock Exchange. Commercial paper is like an automatic daily reference, and even the secrets of simple how the Federal Reserve runs the country. Daily standard transaction, before the bells rung, at the end of the day, it's New York Stock Exchange virtually every single day. In any case, so I thought I'd, say that real quick. And my name is Wade, okay? You can see me at my YouTube.com channel at Wade ASV, pretty PRIDDY, and Wade ASV, PRIDDY 192. Okay, great. Have a good day, yeah.